Good morning. I'm happy to welcome all of you to the 22nd webinar of the Franco-German Observatory of the Indo-Pacific. This observatory is co-organized by the German Institute for Global and Area Studies, or GIGA, in Hamburg, and the CRI, or Centre de Recherche Internationale at Sciences Po in Paris, namely by Dr. Christophe Jaffrelot from CERI, Professor Patrick Köllner and Professor Amrita Nalika, both from GIGA. You can find more information on the preceding webinars, including 21 audios and 13 videos on the GIGA and the CRI web pages. We are honored to have as our speaker today Professor Dr. Thitinan Pongsudhirak. He will share with us his insights on Thailand's autocracy complex and its Indo-Pacific consequences. Professor Thitinan is Professor of International Relations at Chulalongkorn University's Faculty of Political Science and Senior Fellow at its Institute of Security and International Studies in Bangkok. He's currently focusing on the comparative politics and geopolitics, geoeconomics of ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific. Today, I guess we will also get some insights into the current political situation in Thailand after the 2023 elections, the crafting of a coalition without the winning Move Forward party, and also on the implications of the return of former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. Before I hand over to my co-host, Dr. David Kamru, I would like to add that after the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, and all of you can post questions online. Please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, because the chat function is only for internal communication. David and I will then gather these questions and forward them to Professor Thitinan. David, would you now like to introduce our speaker for today?
Well, I'm willing to do it, but unless Eugénie is now back with us. Eugénie, can you, I'll go ahead and do the introduction and you can intervene perhaps afterwards. So it's a real pleasure to have Thitinan as a speaker. Thitinan is sort of the go-to person when you want to know anything about Thailand's internal politics, but particularly Thailand's foreign relations. He's a regular contributor to journals such as the Nikkei Asia. His center at Chulalongkorn University is very important in terms of providing information to the media and to naive and foreign visitors like myself. So, Thitinan, it's lovely to see you again, and we look forward to your presentation today.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to speak for no more than 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes, and then we have less than an hour now. So let me break it up into 3 parts. The title is Autocracy Complex, Thailand's Autocracy Complex in the Indo-Pacific. So I want to talk about first the Indo-Pacific, why we are so focused now on this geostrategic framework. And then to talk a little bit about Thailand, the autocracy that we've seen in Thailand, the autocratization, and why it has been a complex. So if you look at Thailand, you know, on a map, it has a lot of geographical advantage. It has a good location, and we know that over the centuries, Thailand's saving grace has been its geography, its place on the map. It allowed Thailand to elude the French and British colonialism in the 19th century, being a buffer in between. And then eventually World War I, World War II, Cold War. ASEAN was the birthplace of ASEAN was in Thailand. Thailand was a founder birthplace, and then playing an instrumental, indispensable role in ASEAN. So, you know, the location undeniably has saved Thailand in many instances in the past. Now, the Indo-Pacific and where Thailand is located now is a different geostrategic frame. Remember, we used to talk about the Asia-Pacific. the Asia Pacific was more about prosperity. You know, we had a long run. You can think of APEC in 1989. Long running. This period coincided with the a good run for globalization. But now the rise of the Indo-Pacific intersects and coincides with the deglobalization, de-risking, the US-China conflict and confrontation. So the Indo-Pacific is not about prosperity. It's about security. It's about security. It's about the US-China conflict. The Indo-Pacific, we know that it was popularized by Prime Minister Abe of Japan. 2007, he made a speech about the confluence of the two seas, the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. But in fact, the roots, the intellectual roots of the Indo-Pacific go back to the 1930s, when the German thinker, strategist, Schauhofer, was writing about how the colonies should rise up against the British and the French, and so on. So you can look it up if you like. The roots go back to 1930s, but in the contemporary frame, it has been popularized by Abe. It then got picked up by Donald Trump. President Trump picked it up in 2017, 2016. After Obama, Trump came in 2017. He had to make this trip to Southeast Asia, to Vietnam, to the Philippines. And then, you know, he started talking about the Indo-Pacific. And before you know it, it was codified into the US National Security Strategy, National Defense Strategy, and the Indo-Pacific became the main geostrategic frame. And the reason is because it encompasses not just the East Asia, the Asia Pacific, but it also encompasses, it includes India and South Asia, and mainly India. So the India, Japan, US, Australia form the Quad countries, expanded from 3 to 4, including India. So, you know, the free and open Indo-Pacific under Trump became a bulwark against China, a way to contain China, to deal with China. And the only country now that I think uses the Asia Pacific, still Asia Pacific, is China. China does not prefer to call this region the Indo-Pacific, because the Indo-Pacific has the connotation of you know, the sense of being against China, the encirclement, the constrainment of China. So this new frame, you know, it has really taken off. The Indo-Pacific is the main language now. You know, every people talk about international relations, the international security. It's not about Asia-Pacific. It's about the Indo-Pacific. So, you know, there's even the Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs. It was set up several years ago, you know, during the Trump administration. A new journal came out. And then, in fact, the latest issue has an article on Thailand, the Indo-Pacific Affairs Journal. So the Indo-Pacific is what we're talking about. Is the main game in the global frame. And you know, we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have the Hamas, you know, crises here, there. But in Asia, the Indo-Pacific is the main frame. Now, Thailand, if you look at Thai foreign policy, where Thailand has been, you know, Thailand has turned autocratic. There has been a systematic autocratization of Thailand, in Thailand, over the past 2 decades. If you go back and look at the literature in the 1990s, you know, Thailand was at the forefront of democratization, not autocratization, but democratization. After 1991 military coup, there was a 1992 uprising in Bangkok. It overthrew a military regime that led to a political reform movement that culminated with the constitution in 1997. And it had all the checks and balances, you know, the separation of powers. It was an eclectic constitution, very popular, but it also underpinned the rise of Thaksin Shinawatra to power in 2001. Now, if you go back and look at that time, you know, in my view, and you know, in my work now, I argue that the peak of Thailand, the highest Thailand's ever achieved in the foreign affairs, international relations, growth prospects, was about October 2003. It was about October 2003. Symbolically, that month, there was a APEC summit in Bangkok. But, the Thaksin administration at that time, 2001, after winning nearly a majority in the lower house, former government had a very strong program for Thailand. And I will confess that, I was a very ardent Thaksin critic from the outset, because I saw that, he had the electoral mandate, but used it as a kind of in a strongman fashion, with abuse of power, with conflicts of interest, even some cronyism, collusion, and all of that. But I look back 20 years now. I've learned a lot over the last 20 years, 25 years. The Thaksin first government had a very strong projection for Thai foreign policy. It had, not just bending with the wind, the bamboo, and so on, but it actually was bending the wind, making the wind bend in a certain way. And Thailand had the ACMEX, the ACD, the Asia Cooperation Dialogue. The logic of that government was, if you're going to be a player on the global stage, you need some platform. And if you play by others' rules, existing platforms, then you will just be, one of the players. In order to take charge, take lead, they came up with their own. The Asia Cooperation Dialogue was an Asian landmass cooperation strategic dialogue, encompassing, stretching, straddling the landmass from North Korea all the way to the Middle East. And then there was the ACMEX, the Ayurveda Chapaya Mekong Economic Cooperation Strategy for mainland Southeast Asia. Bilateral free trade agreements was also a plank in foreign policy projection. So, you look back at that era, they had cluster development projects, niche industries, you can call them today, we would call them industrial policies, banking on food, fashion, tourism, automobiles, healthcare sector. So they had really a game plan to take Thailand upward and outward. At the same time, of course, there was a lot of controversies at home. There was a war on drugs, very violent. There was some corruption allegations, all kinds of things at home. But outward, Thailand was seen as a regional leader. Thaksin was seen as a successor to Lee Kuan Yew and Muhammad Mahathir of Malaysia. And at that time, about 2003, Thailand was really on the global map. Leaders came in for the summit, and Thailand was seen as a mover, shaker. It had audience, it had attention, and that was a peak, I think, in my view now, looking back. And that time, in turn, the Thaksin juggernaut became a challenge to the established centers of power. And here we turn to the domestic Thai politics, which has really been at a standstill. Back and forth, up to these days. There's still no clear way ahead in Thai politics. And the murkiness has held back Thailand's foreign policy projection, and it has diminished Thailand's role on the international stage. It has, dented Thailand's prestige, credibility, reliability. So Thailand basically is not a major player on the global stage anymore. So when you look at the Indo-Pacific, Trump called it the free and open Indo-Pacific. I think Japan also has a similar coinage, FOIP. The Biden administration calls it the Indo-Pacific strategy. But the Indo-Pacific between Trump and Biden, in fact, they don't deviate, they don't diverge. They are very much convergent. They're on the same page. And when it comes to this frame, this geostrategic projection in the US, there's bipartisan support for what the U.S. is doing in the Indo-Pacific, pushing back against China. And now we're seeing, worse to come, more protectionist export controls. Really a kind of economic nationalism we're seeing U.S. and China and other countries. And this is really a bad omen for all of us moving forward. For Thailand in this space, it should be, Thailand would be should be the key player, right? It is a U.S. treaty ally. it is very close to China, the most probably intimate ties with China compared to all the rest of the countries. I mean, look, Southeast Asia, there have been race riots against ethnic Chinese in Malaysia, Indonesia. You know, ethnic Chinese have had some tension difficulties in these countries, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. But in Thailand, they've been fully absorbed, integrated, you know, seamlessly. So with China, Thailand has very close ties, intimate, and no direct border. Very close to China without a border. Countries with borders with China have had troubles. You know, you can look at India, Laos, Vietnam, and of course even Japan and so on the East China Sea. So Thailand should really be at the forefront, at the cutting edge of this of the action that's taking place in the Indo-Pacific, but it is not. It is an also-ran country. I mean, I hate to say, and I'm sad to say, that it's an also-ran country, meaning that it has fallen off the radar in many cases. So if you look at, you know, Thailand missed the boat on the TPP, CPTPP. It kind of joined RCEP, but you know, you look at the various summits. Sometimes the Democracy Summit not invited to. You know, Thailand's role abroad, applying to the Human Rights Council, but didn't get it. And the main reason is because of the domestic politics. Thailand has had 2 military coups, and you know, military coups in Thailand, we've had a good number, on average, almost every 5 years or so. There's been 13 successful coups, and you know, another 7 failed coup attempts. So overall, there's been a lot of coups here, and the coup in 2006 was not it looked like a typical run-of-the-mill Thai coup, Thai military coup, which meant the military took over for 15 months, came up with a new constitution. It reset the electoral game, had the election after 15 months. But the Thaksin party, after being dissolved, kept winning. So this is the crux of it, you know, the Thaksin challenge. Going back to 2001, won the election by a landslide and set the record for being first to complete a full term, to be re-elected, and to have a one-party government in 2005. Within months, protests against Thaksin took place, against Thai Rak Thai, and by 2006, in September, it was overthrown in a military coup. That coup was damaging, but you know, I think the international community, the US, for example, took a kind of a slap on the wrist or a lenient response, suspending IMET, you know, just very nominal ceremonial punitive measures. And then urging Thailand to get back on the democratic game. And then had election in 2007. But the problem was that the Thaksin party kept coming back. Despite dissolution, won the election in 2007, formed the government in 2008 with Samak, and then later on Somchai. That 2008 was a very nasty and ugly year because the yellow shirts came back to protest against the Thaksin-aligned government. And, you know, this culminated with the airport closure, and then the dissolution of the Thaksin party again in December, for a second time in December 2008. And then you had the Democrat Party-led government with military assistance, and then you had the red shirt protests in 2009, 2010. And then Yingluck came in, Thaksin's sister, Yingluck Shinawatra, led the Pheu Thai party, the third party, won the election again. So, you know, you look at Thailand in the Indo-Pacific, and you look at Thailand at home, the complete contrast. Thailand needed to play a role. It needed to make moves in the Indo-Pacific frame by 2016, 2017. But 2017, when the Indo-Pacific frame, the geostrategic frame, when Trump was really peddling it, Thailand was preoccupied at home. It had internal conflicts. It had a military government, and the military government had a complex. And here's what I call the autocracy complex. And I got this from, you know, some interviews, speaking with people, diplomats, journalists, even, you know, politicians and so on. The military government, they had a complex because they could not, you know, they could not meet a lot of the world leaders. There were sanctions, very strong sanctions imposed by the US. I think President Obama in 2015 2015, 2016, very harsh, because Obama was supportive of women leadership, of democracy, human rights, and and freedom, and so on. And when Yingluck, a female prime minister, was overthrown, Yingluck and Obama had met before, had a working rapport. When she was overthrown, the U.S. I think also was misled that there would not be a coup, and a coup actually took place. So the U.S. Responded harshly on the coup, and then the military government didn't have anywhere to go, with the U.S., with Europe imposing sanctions and banning top-level visits. And Thailand lost credibility, lost its standing, so it had to seek support from China. So it went to China. A lot of this military government from 2014 to 2019 was all China. Trump was different. When he came in, he invited General Prayut, military government leader, prime minister, to the White House in October 2nd, 2017. So there was that a bit of a rebalancing, and the U.S. I think saw Southeast Asia as about China. It was not about democracy, autocracy. So I think the Prayut government got some ground back under Trump, but not that much. And then by 2019, there was an election again. There was another constitution, the military kind of inspired. So after 2019, Prayut stayed for another 4 years. We had 9 years of Prayut. And if you go back and look, General Prayut could not speak English, and he had translator. And I think when he spoke to the Shangri-La Dialogue, I think it was 2022, as one of the keynotes, and it was all in Thai. It was like a tough man talking. It didn't come across very well. So there was not just a complex from being an autocratic government that seized power. There was also a complex, I think, an inferiority complex of General Prayut himself. I mean, he couldn't really engage. How can you play a role on the world stage when you can't really engage? You can be Japanese prime minister and don't speak English. But if you're like Thailand prime minister, you better speak a little bit of English to get around, to get your way, to mingle, to hobnob. So I think there was a personality, the personal inferiority complex as well, that he was over his head, not speaking a language, but the substance about the issues of the day, globalization, the trade tariff sanctions, and the trade tariff war between U.S. and China, and all of that. So he was not the man for the job. Let's put it that way. This is what I mean by the complex. The country had a complex because it was autocracy, military seized power. The leader also had a complex because he just didn't belong to in the crowd of world leaders, and this has cost Thailand dearly. If this happened for a year or two, it wouldn't be so bad. But when this happens for 20 years, after a while you look back and you say, wow, what's happened here? Thailand has really sunk and has really gone down the drain. You look at the semiconductor, the semiconductor innovation, the last 10 years, we missed that whole train. Thailand missed a lot of the bilateral FTAs. Trade policy did not move. And you look at the growth, the trend growth over the last decade, the trend growth used to be that Thailand would average, 3.2, 3.3. The Thaksin years, the first Thaksin administration was about 4.6, almost 5%. But then it came down to about 3-ish, 3.3. But now over the last decade, if you go back and get the figures from the Bank of Thailand, it averaged 1.5. So Thailand is stagnating. We're seeing signs of political decay and economic stagnation. And this is why Thailand doesn't have the strength, the wherewithal, the means, what it takes to engage on the international stage the ways that it used to. So in the Indo-Pacific, sad to say that Thailand is, just a mediocre player. You look at who's the important countries now. I'm sure if you go to seminars and conferences, this is reflected in think tanks. People talk about Indonesia, Vietnam. China plus one is China plus, should be China plus Thailand. That should be the strategy of companies, multinationals. But it's China plus Vietnam. is China plus Indonesia, is China plus India. Where is Thailand? So coming back to issues at home, I think we're still stuck where we were where we have been over the last 2 decades. There's still, the elected government still cannot run the country. And when you have a government that seizes power, they don't know how to run the country. So they run the economy to the ground. When you have elected governments, like the Pheu Thai is the second best elected government, the first best should have been the Move Forward Party. And if you look at the Move Forward Party agenda, the policy agenda, even putting aside the reforms of the monarchy, the military, just look at the economic agenda. This is what Thailand needs to do. I mean, value chain upgrading, economic upgrading, climbing up the value chains, decentralization, tackling the monopolies, giving the SMEs a chance, fiscal reforms. So basically, promoting more competition and innovation, reforming education, upskilling. It's all the things that Thailand needs to do to unlock its potential and unleash its talent. But it's not happening because of the politics. So, I'll leave it at that. This is why we're seeing Thailand diminished. And I think unless something changes, we can see a prolonged period of political decay and economic stagnation. And Thailand will just be watching train after train going by. And, before we know it, we will still be around. But instead of being up there on the global value chains, we'll be picking the low-hanging fruits or the fruits on the ground, like visa-free tourism as such. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Thitinan. Yeah, I would like everybody to pose questions online. So far, we have one, I would say, comment, not a real question, by David Fouquet. He recalls that in a previous period, perhaps during the early Thaksin period, it was the main aspiration of Thailand to become a member of the OECD, the institution of wealthy, developed, industrialized countries, which has been steadily eroded by the era of political turmoil and autocracy, a sad trade-off. Maybe you can comment on that, but I would have one question. I mean, I was a bit surprised that autocracy complex is interpreted by you in a psychological way. I expected something totally different. But what about the last elections in 2023? Did foreign policy play a major role? I mean, it would make sense for the opposition to politicize this decline of foreign policy in general, as you have explained. What do you think about that?
Okay, 3 issues to address at this stage. OECD, 20 years ago, Thailand did have an ambition to be a developed country by a certain date, and to be a member of the OECD was aiming very high, very ambitious at that time. But, looking back, Thailand is now trying to become an OECD country again. And it's not a bad ambition because it would require certain criteria. So the reforms that are needed at home, economic reforms, at home itself, because of vested interests, protectionist interests, and so on, would not happen. We would need external pressure to reform internally. So OECD application, OECD criteria would be one way. Bilateral FTAs would be another way. FTAs, I think, can really reform the Thai economy, in a kind of a side way. Autocracy complex, I want to be clear on that. In international relations, Andreas, is what I meant. Because you have an autocratic government, seized power, military government, it had an inferiority complex abroad, right? And also international stakeholders, international community did not treat military authoritarian government in Thailand the same way. So this autocracy became a complex for the country, but I added that it's also for the military leader at the time. Okay. Foreign policy played a role in the election in May 2003 like it never had before. You know, most countries, you look at the US when they have election, foreign policy is not, but now I think maybe the China card is being played by both parties, but traditionally, foreign policy is not big. It's not a decisive issue in the electoral outcomes. But in Thailand, you know, foreign policy is a far distance. I mean, no party has really campaigned on foreign policy grounds. But in 2023 election, foreign policy did figure in both Pheu Thai and especially Move Forward Party, because I think what happened is that, you know, these parties realize how far we have dipped, how far we have diminished in the, you know, in the global landscape, in the global pecking order. And it became an issue domestically. We all know. I think Thais, you know, reasonable Thais would concede that Thailand's international standing has never been so low, has never been this low. Right? In ASEAN, I mean, Thailand picked the wrong side on the Myanmar civil war under the Prayut government. It sided with the military regime, and the military regime now is losing. In ASEAN, Thailand is not taking a leading role in ASEAN, on Myanmar, ASEAN, and so on. So most of Thais, I think, and you know, the Move Forward Party, Pheu Thai Party as well, they campaign on restoring Thailand's role, international role, and Thailand's weight and clout in ASEAN. So if you go back and look at the election campaigns, I mean, they talk about Myanmar policy. I mean, you know, no party has done that. So Move Forward actually talk about how we would recalibrate this Myanmar policy. And even now, as an opposition, they're doing that, trying to promote change and support the pro-democracy movement and so on. The opposition, the resistance coalition, the revolution against the military. So foreign policy did play a role in 2023, unlike we've seen in the past, especially with Move Forward and Pheu Thai Party, especially Move Forward Party, because we all realize how low Thailand has sunk.
The Prime Minister was in Melbourne recently for this Australia-ASEAN summit, and his silence during that compared, say, to President Jokowi from Indonesia would seem to confirm the absence. Is there no sign of any attempt to try to reinvest in ASEAN or to try and play a role in Myanmar? I thought there was a proposal for humanitarian aid or something by the new Prime Minister.
So two issues, Myanmar and then ASEAN. I mean, the Prime Minister Sethar Thavisin, he's hardworking. There's no doubt he's hardworking. I think people will not disagree with that. You know, he has traveled a lot, and he has been trying to market Thailand, and he's been trying to drum up investments and so on and so on. But you know, after 6 months in office, it's looking like he's running on empty. Running on empty means that, you know, you want to sell Thailand, but you know, the product that you're trying to sell, the Thailand that is being sold, has to be a better Thailand. There has to be some structural reforms. There has to be some tackling of the monopolies and the corruption and the education and so on. Otherwise, you can go around the world and say, hey, you know, come to Thailand. But what to come for? Where are the skilled workers? Where's the education? Where the, you know, the tax incentives, the supply chain connections? You know, so he ends up having to pick the lower hanging, you know, freebies like visa-free tourism for Chinese and Russians and so on. The structural issues like bilateral FTA, the FTAs, for example, we had one with Sri Lanka, but Sri Lanka is so small and, you know, not very wide, so it's almost insignificant. The FTA that we really should focus on is the EFTA FTA, and then the EU FTA. And the EU FTA could really institute some reforms, economic reforms. But, you know, that's at least 2 years. And, you know, Thailand has no draft. It's relying on the EU draft. So the Prime Minister himself, I mean, he works hard, but I think he needs to look at the back a little bit and see how we can provide some structural reforms to entice FDI, to entice investors, and moreover, I think this government, the Pheu Thai-led government, they have not been able to implement their, signature policy pledges, the 10,000 baht digital wallet scheme, which I disagree with on economic grounds. I think it's not going to work the way they think it will. I don't think it will create the multiplier effects that they think it will. It will not be a fiscal boost to really get the GDP up. It was a kind of a campaign idea they had to come up with, and it was kind of the tried and tested populism that they kept winning elections with. But now they're in power, I think, for political reasons. I think that it should deserve to be implemented, because if we have an elected civilian government that cannot implement its policies, we saw that with Yingluck, it was prevented. If the Thai government cannot implement policies, in the end, eventually, it will lose credibility. And after that, somehow, the military will come back. We've seen this before. So for a democratic outcome, the elected civilian government should be able to implement policies. But you look at the land bridge, this is another strategy they have, linking the two oceans, Pacific and Indian Oceans, to the Gulf of Thailand, the Andaman Sea. That's gone nowhere. The bilateral FTAs really has not found traction. The soft power is still nebulous, So you look at the Pheu Thai-led government, they're not coming up with the goods. But I'm also thinking that the deal that they made to bring back Thaksin, the deal that Thaksin made with the royalist establishment, that deal, when the government was formed, I was a little bit more optimistic. I thought maybe there'll be a little bit of a compromise. Maybe now Pheu Thai will lead the government. Second best should be move forward, but it's a long story. Move forward is systematically denied, marginalized, probably will be dissolved. So Pheu Thai leads the government. I thought maybe, okay, they can get the Thailand moving again. Maybe the powers that be will allow that. But now it's looking like the powers that be are not allowing it. They basically, allow Thaksin back. Thaksin is back at home. But the Pheu Thai-led government is facing all kinds of obstruction. People filing charges, the Council of State is impeding the 10,000 baht. The anti-corruption is against this, that. So the policy platform is not moving forward, and therefore Thailand is still stuck.
Do people put your questions into the Q&A? Eugénie had to leave for a class, so he's asked me to take over in terms of continuing the moderation. If others don't yet have a question, I have one, which is, you talk a lot about the Thai case in particular, but to what extent has Thailand also suffered from this resurgence of Vietnam? Vietnam has become the sort of alternative place for friendshoring or offshoring from China, and a more assertive, Indonesia. To what extent is this a kind of a relative situation of Thailand in relation to its neighbors?
Certainly, I mean, Thailand is losing out. As I mentioned earlier, if being stuck at home and this kind of intractable conflict didn't last so long, then we could have recovered. And now it's getting kind of late. It's never too late, but it's getting kind of late to plug into this reconfiguring supply chains. So Vietnam, used to be easy to teach about the differences across these economies. Vietnam's GDP used to be about half of Thailand, and now it's coming up, at this rate in about 8 years. Vietnam's GDP at this growth rate, if Thailand grows the way it has been, and Vietnam is 6-7%. Then Vietnam's GDP will overtake Thailand in less than a decade. Certainly the China plus one, it just happens, David, that, this whole innovation, this burst of innovation, right? And this US-China conflict, this decoupling, de-risking, is happening over the last decade when Thailand is really just stuck at home and it has no vision for the future, right? And so it missed a lot of trains. So the China plus one is going to Vietnam, Indonesia, and already they're bigger markets. They have political stability. They have growth strategy, forward planning, which Thailand does not have. Indonesia, one thing I noticed about Indonesia, they had election and they will not have a new government until like October or something. But the losers of this election, there'll be some charges and some allegations, but the winner will take office and will run the country in Indonesia. It'll be Prabowo. And there'll be a lot of continuity with Jokowi. In Vietnam, they have a government from the Communist Party. It runs the country. In Thailand, only in Thailand in this region, well, apart from Myanmar, Thailand has an election, and the elected parties, the winners, are not allowed to run the country. Right? So the losers of Thai elections don't accept the election results, and before you know it, after the election, they start to try to derail and sabotage, subvert the election winners, and that being the Move Forward Party. And even Pheu Thai Party is being stymied systematically. So this is the difference. This is why I think Vietnam is searching, Indonesia, political stability, forward planning, growth strategy. And if this is like a year or two, even 3-5 years, but when it's a decade, Thailand will become also ran.
There are some questions now in the chat function mostly. The first one by Natalie Mugudovic. How would you suggest could Thailand regain its former status? That's a very broad question. I will add a few other questions, for example, by Olivia Coustons. She has, I think, 3 questions. How influential did you find the Milk Tea Alliance in Thailand in swaying the public opinion on the government? Was the Thai electoral system particularly propitious to Thaksin's electoral success? Were the parties divided, thus enabling him to gain a majority and come to power? And finally, if Thailand eventually democratizes again, how would this impact the geopolitical dynamics of the Indo-Pacific? There are at least two other questions, but I will pose them later.
Okay, I'm not going to be able to answer all the questions because I want to address the others as well. But yeah, I mean, the regaining. So the two main issues here. I mean, how can Thailand get out of this rut? And this is it's the ultimate question that we're facing here. So it's about domestic politics. It's about the role of the traditional institutions of the military, the monarchy, bureaucracy, judiciary. They, the role that they play in the constitutional order has to be, renegotiated until we have a new political order under a constitution that addresses popular demands, grievances, expectations. Then Thailand will be stuck. You have very clear election results last May 2023. Move Forward and Pheu Thai together won 2/3 of the vote. Right, the conservative royalist parties won a lot less. And what happened? The largest vote winner was sidelined and likely to be dissolved. There was a question about the Constitutional Court, the Election Commission making the move to dissolve Move Forward Party by the Election Commission. That's going to go forward. So the answer to that would be that this will likely lead to the dissolution of Move Forward Party. It could happen as maybe even April. Sooner, I think it's going to be sooner rather than later, the way that the dynamics are shaping up, in my view. And this could lead to a ban, long ban, 10-year ban on the leading politicians of the Move Forward Party, and even possibly a lifetime ban on its leader. I mean, this is like a repetition, right? We've seen this before. Dissolution of Thai Rak Thai, the Thaksin Party, in May 2007, the Palang Prachachon, another Thaksin Party, in December 2008. the Move Forward predecessor, Future Forward, was dissolved in 2020, in February 2020. So now Move Forward is going to be dissolved. So, I mean, I think it should be clear to our international observers about Thailand, this is not how democracy functions, when the largest vote winners are systematically, repeatedly dissolved, and its politicians, representatives of the people, are banned for a long time, for years. And, you know, the bans also, it's not just, you know, in any country, you have certain political talent. So, you know, in your countries, you have some people, politicians. I'm not, you know, I'm not cut out to be a politician, but a lot, you know, people who are willing to go into the political fray and get elected and try to run the country. There are only so many of them. And so the best talent that we've had, the best political talent that we've had in Thailand have been banned. And, you know, when you ban younger voices, younger talent, newcomers, who do you end up with? You end up with, you know, the generals, the military generals, and all conservatives, and a lot of them are old men, and they run the country to the ground like we've seen. So that's the question. That's the answer to the question about the election commission and Move Forward, likely dissolution, the way it is shaping up. So to regain its footing, this has to be settled about the role of the traditional institutions and the new, you know, the political institutions that answer to popular grievances and demands. So basically, you know, what's going to be the role of the military, the monarchy, judiciary in the constitutional order, and then the role of the political parties, parliament. This is something that has been stuck, and we've had 3 constitutions since 1997. And I think there'll have to be some kind of a constitutional renegotiation to settle these differences. Otherwise, we'll see this kind of ongoing back and forth, tit for tat, and instability in the medium and longer term. If Thailand does regain its democratic footing, I think this would be, you know, it would be a pivotal momentum for the democratization in other parts of the world, certainly in Southeast Asia, because Thailand was a test case in the late 1990s, and it's gone, you know, very autocratic over the last 2 decades. So it would certainly, you know, stand upright, play an international role, and will be given the due respect, you know, respect, recognition, credibility, prestige by the international community. So that kind of Thailand, I think, could really do a lot in the world. Yeah, the multi-alliance is, you know, had some traction earlier. Maybe there's more questions or issues. Yeah.
This is well, perhaps unless there are other questions in the chat.
There are.
Okay, so do read them out, Andreas.
Okay, there was one question by Moritz Kleine-Brockhoff on the EC decision to ask the Constitutional Court to dissolve the Move Forward Party. I think you already talked about it. But then there's another question by Adiraj Anand from GIGA. I'm curious about how you assess the current role and strength of Thailand's civil society. Could it play a role in edging the country towards the necessary political and economic reforms in the years to come? That's one question.
Yeah, there has been a growing crackdown of freedom of expression, fundamental freedoms, basic rights, and if you look at you know, the headlines in social media and what's happening in Thailand, you know, a number of people have been arrested, and issues have to do with the monarchy, with the reform of the monarchy. So civil society in this space, I think the space of civil society has been restricted, curtailed, because the legal persecution has intensified. So the risks of expression are much higher now. So civil society used to play a vibrant role in the 1990s, even 2000s, but now you know, the parameters have become more draconian. The risks are higher. So civil society has a much more limited space, and we will see that kind of repression most likely intensify in the coming months. So it's not a good trend.
This is a delicate question, so don't feel obliged to answer it. But do we have any idea of how the palace feels about the situation? I mean, do we have any sense of where the monarchy stands in all of these developments?
Well, we're not we're not legally allowed to discuss what's not factual. But we do know, for example, that Dr. Thaksin came back and received a royal pardon that reduced his jail sentence from 8 years to 1 year. And that was very sudden, and it was the same day that Sethar became prime minister. So yeah, I think that overall, I mean, you'd have to look at the headlines in Thailand. The palace does have a role, and that role cannot really be fully discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think there's one maybe final question by Patrick Zoll. Can democratic countries do anything to nudge Thailand towards democracy, or will this be considered as foreign interference and push Thailand's leaders even closer to China?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that Thailand is, this government, despite its shortcomings, and the Pheu Thai-led government as second best, despite its shortcomings, is much better than the government we had under General Prayut. And Thailand now has rebalanced a bit, has become more omnidirectional, not just going to China, but also going to, approaching all other countries, other major powers, and even Middle East countries, all countries, to come invest, to engage. So not just China. But in terms of democratization, I think that the international community is also limited, because the US, for example, its priority is really about China. I mean, it does have some say about human rights, democracy, but I think has been superseded by its geostrategic priorities on dealing with China in the Indo-Pacific. Yeah, and then I think the EU, the EU imposed some sanctions. It suspended the EU-Thai FTA negotiations, and now it's revived because Thailand has an elected government. So that's a good move. And yeah, it's also sending a message, the right message, that elected civilian government with, democratic legitimacy will receive recognition and engagement from the international community. So I think that's already on the board, and it should be sustained, should be kept. Beyond that, it's not easy, because Thailand is a significant country with a place you cannot really do without Thailand. So the international community, US, EU, and all the other countries, they will be limited.
Maybe one very last question by Natalie Mungudovic. Would the Thai people consider marching against the current leaders?
Marching we saw in 2020. There was a suppression by force, by water cannons, by legal persecution, by lawfare, which means to use the law to stifle and subdue dissent and criticism. So it doesn't seem to be in the offing. So I think the one test would be that when, probably not if, but when move forward is dissolved, what will happen? I suspect that there will be some protests, a lot of rumblings, but it will remain pent up because the repression will be stronger and the cost will be very high. And this will kind of move along until, some catalyst down the road in the medium term. I think down the road, medium term, we could see a broad, a kind of uprising or popular dissent manifesting in action on the streets and so on. So I think we haven't seen the last of it, but I just don't see it coming in the next in the near term, despite some rumblings and some pockets and limited protests in response to move forward likely dissolution.
Can I just ask a question in relation to the subject of the Indo-Pacific? In the policy documents of the Defense Ministry and the Foreign Ministry, does the notion of the Indo-Pacific actually enter into their framework of these policy documents?
Okay. Yeah, I'll just take this as a last question. Thank you. I mean, it's good to end on the Indo-Pacific because it's the title of the talk. Also, there was a question about Myanmar. So Thailand trying to now shift its position and recalibrate, readjust. On Myanmar is trying to come up with a humanitarian initiative, and then to try to provide some assistance and engaging with different stakeholders. I still think that it's falling short. That Thailand needs to engage with NUG, also ethnic minority leaders and so on. But at least it's going in the right direction, but still, a long way to go. On Indo-Pacific, I mean, moving forward, if you look at the Thai foreign policy projection, first, it's very passive reactive. Passive reactive goes back to this autocracy complex under Prayut. So now with the new government, they're trying to be a little bit more active, assertive, but it's taking some time. But I think they will need the time. Let's see what they do with Myanmar. Let's see what they do with ASEAN and broader. I mean, they want to apply to OECD. They want to do the Schengen visa, for example. I mean, it's very ambitious. I don't think it will happen, but at least they're going in the right direction. They just need to follow up, and then the foreign ministry. Our foreign policy is conducted by diplomats. They suffered for the years under General Prayut and Thailand's low, diminished international standing. So now it's a low base, so there's a lot of gap to be made, and we can make a lot of improvements in the near term. So I'm hoping that we will see some foreign policy projection, David. I think in the Indo-Pacific, Thailand currently does not have a strategy that I can see. But give it, if we can keep elected civilian government in office this time, next time, it will come. We will have some kind of projection and posture and position. But when we have autocratic military government, it's going to be very reactive, passive, because it cannot face up to the international community. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Thitinan, thank you very much for this really very enlightening talk. David, do you know who will be the next speaker in the observatory?
It's going to be Professor Greg Noble, and we're going to talk about the electric vehicle race in the Indo-Pacific, which is a subject which actually also concerns Thailand. Thailand used to be the automobile manufacturing hub in Southeast Asia, and it's one of the areas in which Thailand has lost out. So in a sense, there will be continuity with this discussion, and we'll, in the next, at the end of April, we'll be looking at a transversal subject organized by the CIRI concerning electric vehicles.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all of you who participated.